is maybe a little bit younger.
Okay, good evening, Rabotai. We're going to talk about the Purim holiday, something very interesting. We already give some lectures on the Purim holiday last year and 2 years ago about the story of Purim. You should look at that, by the way. I'm going to post it tomorrow, the story of Purim. That was a very interesting lecture that we did 2 years ago with Jimmy and some other people. You should listen to that if you want to hear the story of Purim. You want to hear the whole Megillah, as they say, the whole Megillah. So Megillah, that's the whole one, right? So anyway, but tonight I want to talk about something else a little bit, not the story so much, but there's a question which comes up in Halakha, regarding the Megillah. Are you allowed to hear the Megillah with a microphone? Or a similar question would be, let's say, are you allowed to hear Megillah with a Zoom, broadcast? Something like that, right? The reason why it's very relevant today is because a lot of people, because of the COVID situation, they can't get really to a synagogue. Like it's not like New York City where there's like 100 synagogues, all over the place. And you can just pick whichever one you like and go there. Over there in the boondocks, some places in America, they only have one synagogue there, it's like 3 hours away, you gotta drive. They have a hard time, some Chabad, 2 hours down the state, somewhere, some boondocks, place like that. So they have a hard time, and even that place itself won't even let you in. Why? Because they say they have too many people already coming. They have a list. They don't want too many people because of COVID. They don't want a big crowd, whatever. They're still like in that mode. COVID mode over there. In the periphery over there, in those outer outlying areas, right? Not like us that we dethroned the emperor, and we defeated his decrees. Right, kill the king, as they say. Kill the governor. So anyway, what we want to talk about is that the fact that the people cannot go to synagogue always. So then, what do you do? How do you hear the Megillah? Because it's an obligation to hear the Megillah. I was just looking at the Shulchan Aruch. It says over there something very strong language. In the laws of Megillah, it says that a person has to put aside everything to hear the Megillah, like every other mitzvah even. So what does that mean? Let's say you're studying Torah, you went to Bet HaMidrash. Doesn't make any difference. You have to stop studying and go and hear the Megillah. Or let's say you're doing some other mitzvah, let's say. Any other mitzvah that you can imagine, whatever it is, you got to stop that mitzvah, shut down the operation and go to hear the Megillah. So hearing the Megillah is considered to be very, very prime importance. What's the reason? Why? Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu made for us a big miracle, that He saved us from annihilation, from extermination, from that Hitler that was in that time, who was Haman, He was another Hitler, this guy, same thing, right? You have the same ideas, no difference. So we have to hear the Megillah in order to remember the miracle that HaKadosh Baruch Hu made for us, and it's considered to be very prime importance that every other mitzvah is pushed aside to hear the Megillah. They say the only mitzvah which is not pushed aside is like if you find a dead body, somewhere, and he has nobody to bury him, so that you can do, to bury the guy. Because it's considered to be like he's ownerless, he has nobody to bury him. It's called met mitzvah. He has nobody to bury him. So that you can do, but besides that, anything else, you got to push it aside. So we see that it's very prime importance. But the problem is like this, right? The people are not getting into minyanim now because of the COVID situation. So what do you do? So some people are suggesting, let's do Zoom. Let's do a Zoom broadcast. We'll broadcast Zoom, and some rabbi will read it, some Baal Koreh will read it, and everybody will listen to it on his computer or his phone, whatever it is, right? Headphones, whatever it is. Are you allowed to do that? Is that called reading the Megillah or not? That's the question, right? So the truth is that, in general, in order to understand this whole sugya, this whole topic, a person has to know a few things about microphones, the way they work, and so forth and so on. Right? I'm not talking now about the issue of using a microphone on Shabbat. That's a different issue, right? That's already been talked about and discussed a lot. Maybe we'll give a lecture on that a different time, another occasion. But right now we got to talk about just a very simple issue, which is that are you allowed to do it on Purim? On Purim, there's no prohibition to use a microphone. But the question is, do you fulfill your obligation by hearing the Megillah with a microphone or with a Zoom broadcast? So, in order to understand that, first of all, let's understand, right? What is a microphone? Microphone, basically, the way it works is that your voice goes into that magnetic, receiver that's in the microphone, and it gets transferred. It gets becomes transmitted. It becomes a electric current. and then it goes into the speaker, and the speaker now all of a sudden, right, makes it sound like your voice is coming out of there. So first of all, it gets transformed, right? That's what I meant to say, right? Your voice is transformed into a current, and then the current is transformed again to a voice in the speaker. That's the way it works. So now the question is like this, right? Is that your voice, really? What you hear from the speaker, from your microphone? Is that you? What's the answer to that question? So the truth is, if you ask the scientists, the Metznerev, they'll tell you no. Why is that? Because your voice already ended when it got into the microphone, became already electric current. And now, whatever's coming out of the speakers is already like just a mimic, some kind of a tuki, some kind of a parrot. It's not really you. It sounds like you, but it's not. It's already been transformed once into electric current and then come back again to a voice. It's amazing technology, right now it's not considered to be amazing technology, but really the truth is that it's quite an amazing feat that we can have. We have something like that. So it's not really your voice. It's already a different voice coming out of there. So is that really, can you do the Megillah like that? It's not your voice. It's like, it's coming out of a computer generated, I don't know, whatever, you want to call it, right? That's the question that you have to answer. So according to what we're saying, apparently, it's not your voice. So that's, it's a fake. It's a fake voice. So how can you feel obligation with hearing something in the microphone or something from the Zoom, which is the same concept basically, same idea? So how can you do such a thing like that? So the truth is that there is an answer somewhat from the Talmud about this question that talks about over there something very interesting. The truth is that a person who's really very expert in Talmud will find something which matches every situation today. Every modern situation, will be matched up with something. It's an amazing piece of work, it covers a vast array of information. It's Talmud. You know what I mean? That's why it's called the Sea of Talmud. It's an ocean. Just like you can drown in there. It's an endless, vast array of information. So one of the things that it says over there is regarding shofar. Right now, it's a mitzvah to hear the shofar on Rosh Hashanah. So it says the Gemara over there in the Talmud, Masechet Rosh Hashanah, Daf Chav Zayin. It says over there that if a person, let's say, was in a cave or something, he blew the shofar into a cave. Right? So what happens? What happens in the cave, right? You get an echo going on over there. You hear the voice of the shofar, and then the echo comes, also. The delay, the delay. Right? So, says the Gemara over there, that if you hear the shofar, the original shofar, you fulfill your obligation. But if you're hearing the echo, you do not. Right? What's the reason why the echo doesn't fulfill the obligation? Any idea you have regarding that? What's the reason why? So the truth is, why that is? Because several things over there going on. One is that the echo has a delay, as we said, right? So it's not like coming right away from your voice. How does the echo get generated, by the way? How does it get generated? You know how it works? It bounces off the walls of the cave. Your voice goes into the walls, bounces off, bounces back, and that's the echo. So if you hear the echo, you didn't fulfill the obligation. You know what I mean? Because that's not really your voice anymore so much. It's like a bounce back, It has a delay. There's also another thing which is interesting, right, regarding the echo. You know what it is? That the echo is already a distorted voice as well. What does that mean? It's already mixed with other voices. There's all kinds of other voices that get mixed in. What kind of voices are we talking about? Like all kinds of voices which are being generated in the cave, all kinds of sounds in there going on. So that echo is already distorted, it's changed, and there's also a delay going on. So this is the reason why you're not fulfilling your obligation when you hear the echo of the shofar. Only when you hear the shofar itself. So now, right, they want to come and say, some poskim, you learn from there also something about the Megillah as well. What does that mean? Just like when it comes to shofar, you don't fulfill your obligation when you have an echo going on, when you're hearing the echo. So same thing with the Megillah. When you're doing it in a microphone, that voice is already not your voice. It already got transformed into electric current, and then back into a speaker, right? So that's already not your voice. So it's like an echo. So therefore, they want to say that you don't fulfill your obligation. You see from the Talmud, right? That's the example that we need to learn from. Interesting, right? So therefore, there are several poskim who write about this. The truth is that there are many of them that will say this. Because of this reason, they say you don't fulfill your obligation with the microphone. Who says this? We have Rabbi Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, and we have Tzitz Eliezer, and Maran Ravadia Shalom. He also writes this in his book Yechavedat, Chelek Gimel. He writes it over there, and many other poskim as well. I can't even mention all of them right now. Right? There's so many of them that they say because it's really basically it's like an echo going on. That's what it is. It's not your real voice. So okay, interesting. So it comes out from there that we cannot use microphones for the Megillah. And the truth is, if you go to like most Orthodox shuls, they won't be reading from microphone because they know this halakha. They know that you're not allowed to read from microphone. And people will not even show up if you do something like that. They'll say, this is like a fake reading. It's not real. So that's on the one hand. But the truth is, on the other hand, there's also another opinion. The poskim. You know what they say? Just the opposite of what we just said. Something very interesting. What they say is that when you're using a microphone, it's not really the same thing as we just mentioned with the shofar and the echo which is in the cave. What's the difference between one and the other? So it says Rabbi Moshe Feinstein in Igrot Moshe, Chelek Bet Orach Chaim, he says over there, it's not the same thing. He tends to hypothesize over there that actually you do fulfill your obligation with the microphone. What's the reason? Why? Because he says that even though, according to the scientists, right, that voice which is coming out of the speaker is not really your voice, but nevertheless, since it's being generated by you speaking into the microphone and it's coming out right away with no delay, so therefore it's not really considered to be like the case of the echo so much. The echo of the cave, of the shofar. Why is that? Because over there's a delay going on. Here it's being generated directly from your voice. As soon as you say something, right away comes out of the speaker. There's no delay whatsoever. Even though there is some, but you can't even feel it. The human being cannot feel that in the sensation. That little delay. So it's negligible. So therefore, according to that, says Moshe Feinstein, it's not really the same case as the shofar with the cave. You're speaking directly and it's coming out directly. And even though they say it's going through transformations, nevertheless it's a direct reaction to your voice. So therefore it could be considered your voice. That's a very interesting idea. So you have also another opinion, as we said, right, in the halakha. There are also, by the way, others who also mention this, that they tend to be more lenient regarding this. We have Rav Tzvi Pesach Frank. We have also Minchat Elazar, the Mooncatcher Rebbe. Also, they also say something similar to that. That the case of the Megillah with the microphone doesn't resemble the case of the shofar in the cave. It's not really the same thing. There's also something else involved here. You know what it is? That the case of the Megillah is not the same as the shofar inherently, right? Fundamentally, it's not the same. Why? Why is it different fundamentally? The reason is because the shofar is from the Torah, right? The Torah commands you to hear the shofar. It says Yom Teruah, right? What does that mean? That Rosh Hashanah is a day for shofar. The Torah tells you. So you must blow the shofar, you must hear the shofar on Rosh Hashanah, according to the Torah. What about the Megillah? Is it from the Torah or not? That's the question, right? Is it from the Torah, Megillah? Do you hear the Megillah? So the truth is, that the Megillah happened much after the Torah was given already. The Torah was given on Har Sinai when the Jews left Egypt. This was like more than 3,000 years ago. But the story of the Megillah happened only about 2,500 years ago, way after that. So it's not from the Torah. So where did that come from, this decree to read the Megillah on Purim? It comes from the rabbis. What does that mean? The rabbis who were in that generation, that the whole story of Purim happened, with Haman and Achashverosh and all these things, they were the ones who made this decree. The truth is, they were prophets also over there. There was prophets as well. So therefore, it's called Divrei Kabbalah. What does that mean, Divrei Kabbalah? In Torah, Divrei Kabbalah means it wasn't decreed by rabbis only, but prophets as well. So it's somewhat stronger. What does that mean? Why is it stronger that it was decreed by a prophet? Because the prophet got that from God. It wasn't from his own volition. God told him to do it. So therefore, his decree is considered to be a little bit stronger. But nevertheless, since Megillah is really not from the Torah, bottom line, right? It's considered to be derabanan, according to most poskim. So therefore, the truth is, right, the rule is, safek derabanan lehakel. What does that mean? That when you have something which is doubtful from the rabbis, rabbinical edict, you can be lenient. So now that also helps us. How does that help us? Because since the Megillah is from the rabbis, it's not from the Torah, even though it's called Divrei Kabbalah, nevertheless, considered to be rabbinical. So therefore we say Safek Rabbanim D'Akir. We say that it's a rabbinical edict, so we're going to be lenient. So what does that mean? How are we going to be lenient? That means that we can say, you know what, the shofar is one thing, because shofar is from the Torah. So there the Talmud was stringent to say that if you heard the echo, you didn't fulfill your obligation. Because that's not the pure voice of the shofar. But when it comes to something which is rabbinical, who told you that you don't fulfill your obligation? Did somebody told you that? No. You can't compare one to the other, right? You can't compare something which is rabbinical to something which is from the Torah. So therefore, we have a doubt over here, right? What's the doubt? The doubt is that maybe the rabbis would not be so stringent when it comes to the Megillah, which is only rabbinical. Maybe that would not be so stringent like they are regarding something from the Torah like the shofar. So the truth is, you can't compare one to the other. It's not really the same thing. So therefore, Rav Moshe Feinstein wants to come and say that really, you can't really learn from the case of the shofar and that whole story over there. That the Megillah you cannot do with a microphone. So therefore, he's lenient about that. As we said, there's also others that are lenient as well. There's a whole group of rabbis who are lenient, as we mentioned some of them. There's also another element, right, as we just mentioned a couple of minutes ago, which is that, as we said, that the shofar case is not the same as the Megillah case. Why is that? As Rabbi Moshe Feinstein pointed out, the case of the shofar, what happens is that there's a delay because it's an echo. And there's also some other things which are being mixed there together, so therefore it's considered something else. There's a delay. But when it comes to the Megillah with the microphone, there's no delay. It comes out right away. So therefore, according to that, right, what's the rule? The rule is that it should be okay to hear the Megillah with a microphone. So what's the halakha? Right, now we saw both sides of the equation over here. Bottom line, right? How do we paskin? How do we decide the halakha? So the truth is, that here, what happens is that even though there's both sides of the equation, but the prevailing custom, in Orthodox communities, is that they don't use microphones. That's the custom. Because why be lenient about it? I mean, there's no compelling reason to be lenient when it comes to this issue. So if there's no compelling reason, even though there is some kind of a fundamental idea there to be lenient, there is justification, reasoning to be lenient, but you don't really need it so much. So why not be on the safe side? The truth is also, that the svara, the logic of the ones that are more stringent, is more compelling. Why is it more compelling? Because bottom line, that voice which is coming out of the speaker is not really your voice. It's a tuki, it's a pirate, it's a parrot, whatever they call it, right? Not a pirate, parrot. It's a parrot voice. That's what it is. So what? How can you fulfill your obligation with a fake voice? That's not really you. It's like if I, let's say, I take a recording, right? Some kind of a recording, MP3 or whatever, something like that. Or those old things, the cassettes and the records, discs. Well, if I hear the Megillah from there, I'm going to fulfill my obligation? No, because it's not a real reading. It was recorded 10 years ago, How can I fulfill my obligation now with that? It's a fake. It's there, but it's not really live. It's not a live broadcast, So that for sure you cannot do. There's no question about that. Because Nobody's reading it right now. You know, it was read 10 years ago. What does it have to do with now? That's a very different issue, you know. So the truth is that it's better to be stringent, and that's a prevailing custom as well amongst most Jews. But the truth is, I'll tell you something interesting. That all the while that I was in Jerusalem, you know, I was there for 19 years, and I was in Maran, Rabbi. I was in his kollel for 15 years, with him for 15 years, and in those 15 years, I never saw the rabbi reading the Megillah without a microphone. He always read with a microphone. You know what I mean? And he read it in many different places, all kinds of places, this place, that place. You know, some places were large, some places were small. So the truth is, you know, that he writes in his book, Yechavedat, a reason why he will be allowed to use a microphone. Something interesting. You know what he says, the rabbi? He says that there is a way to justify this. Why? Because if a person is sitting close enough to you when you're reading, that he would hear you anyway without the microphone. So he says, in that case, it works. Why? Because he's also hearing your real voice as well. Not only the microphone, when he sits there. There's also others that agree with this, by the way, with this concept. That if you're sitting close enough to the guy, even though he's using a microphone, but the fact that you're hearing also his real voice, you're close enough to hear his real voice, so then it's okay. Why? Because you're hearing the real voice as well. Brought down in several books this concept. Minchat Elazar, Tzvi Pesach Frank. It's also brought down in the name of the Lubavitcher Rebbe in one of the books that he also agrees with that. And even though he says, right, that he's stringent regarding microphones, he's stringent. He says you cannot use a microphone, as we mentioned, right? The reason why it's not really your voice, the microphone. But when it comes to sitting close enough to him that you can hear also the real voice as well, together, one with the other, they say it's okay. So Rabbi also paskins like that, Maran. Rabbi, he also paskins like that in his book Yechavedat. That if you're close enough to hear the real voice as well, then it's okay. But you know what it is? The truth is that this is a very problematic claim, what they're saying, these rabbis. You know what the problem is over here? What's the problem? Let me ask you a question. If a person is sitting really close to, like, let's say, he goes to a concert, right? He's sitting really, really close. You know this very well, because, you know, you're a musician. You're sitting very close, let's say, to the artist, you know, who's playing something, whatever, singing. And he's using a microphone. So, does that mean you're hearing his real voice too? I'm asking your opinion, you know. Are you hearing his real voice or not, if he has a microphone? Let's say you're very close, you know?
If I'm very close, probably, I'd glimpse of it, yeah.
Well, let's say you're like from here to the door, you know, 50 feet away.
I may not be hearing his voice.
Why? What's the reason why?
Well, it's very loud there.
That's the whole point.
A lot of commotion.
That's the whole point.
Yeah, you know.
So what does that mean? In other words, in theory, I would hear his voice if there wasn't a microphone. I would hear it 50 feet away. But the problem is that the voice of the microphone is drowning out his voice.
Yes.
You know? So this is the problem that these rabbis, I don't think they took that into consideration. You know? That what happens is that even if you're close sometimes to somebody who's using a microphone, the microphone is drowning out the voice. You can't hear nothing. It's like, you know, I'll give you a very simple example. You know, let's say you're at home, right? You start like playing some music, you know, you're blasting the speakers, you know, like blasting it, you know.
Can't hear the doorbell.
Exactly, you know. Why is that? Because it's being drowned out. You can't hear nothing. You know. So here also the same thing. The microphone could drown it out.
Yeah.
So the truth is, you know, that this is not really a very reliable.
Would you say
svara.
that you
Yeah.
were Rabbi Obadiah's prodigy? Were you his number one student, or? No, just for curiosity.
I'm just a regular guy. What can I tell you? You know, trying to make a dent somewhere.
No, I'm just curious because.
But you hear what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So the truth is, you know, you shouldn't be afraid to say the truth. If you know something, which is true, you know, even though some big rabbi said like this or that, you have to say the truth. That's what we're here for. You know?
This was so crucial. You know, your voice.
You know what I mean? So now, what comes out of this altogether? You know, I personally don't think, by the way, but Maran, Rabbi, he used to read with a microphone all the time. The last 15 years that I saw him, always read with a microphone.
That's good enough for
So the question is, but how is that? He writes himself that you shouldn't use a microphone. What does that mean? In other words, at least he agrees that the ones who are far away will not, who will not hear his real voice. He says you should not, but he himself did. This is the problem, And this always bothered me, by the way. You should know. It's one of the things that bothered me that Maran, Ravadia.
To me, it still is a voice. I mean, I'm going to see a concert. Yes, it's not a religious lecture or it's not a religious holiday, but the guy singing, it's an impossibility for him to get his voice across the whole stadium. I mean, I'm still hearing David Coverdale's voice.
Yeah, it's a good point. In other words, you're enjoying his,
his voice is being carried through the current.
Yes, okay,
and I still hear his voice.
Right. But technically speaking, you understand what I told you, right?
Of course.
It's already not really his voice,
Right.
technically speaking,
Yeah.
technically.
Yeah. If you're in an opera,
Yeah.
where you're not allowed to cough or sneeze and everybody's whisper quiet,
Yeah.
not even whispering, then obviously those fat screaming Italians, they don't need any microphones,
Okay, I like that. That's good. So, bottom line, it was always a mystery to me. Like, how did the rabbi, use a microphone? Because sometimes he used to read in a big hall, like Yechabadat, the main synagogue over there was quite large, like bigger than this main hall over here, like 1/3 larger,
Yeah.
At least.
Well, I think he realized he had to get the message of the Torah across.
Yeah, okay, so let somebody else read, let somebody else younger, read who's has more energy. What's the problem, So what gives, like, in other words, why did he feel he had to do that? The truth is that what he was doing was against what he himself wrote in his book. It always bothered me, by the way, this whole idea, But I didn't open my mouth. I kept my mouth shut, I was just a little guy over there, a little boy, a student, what I mean? I didn't open my mouth. The truth is, it bothered me because it was against what he wrote himself. And the truth is, as we said, right, even the ones that are sitting close, no guarantee that they're hearing his real voice.
Yeah. Didn't Pharaoh break his own oath also? Before he died, he said the words Moses.
Okay. Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah. In other words, he told him, I won't speak to you again. And he went,
Yeah, I'm not comparing Pharaoh,
right.
To Abadia, but...
Yeah, so I'll tell you something interesting, that after thinking about it, how do we justify this whole thing?
Yeah.
And what does that have to do with us, practically speaking? Because our question really is a person allowed to hear the Megillah on Zoom or with a microphone? Especially when he has no choice. He can't really go to a synagogue. He doesn't have a vicinity, a synagogue, which has a normal reading. There are places like that in America, many places. People are crying to me all the time, complaining to me about that.
I think it's better to hear the Megillah than...
Yeah, you have a point.
So, I mean...
But can we find justification, halakha? Let's see if we can find something, right?
Well, Abadia found justification.
Right, question is, what is it? Because he never explained that. You know what I mean? So we have to fill in the blanks over here. Otherwise, we got a problem.
I think it was self-explanatory. If he didn't use the microphone, it wouldn't have reached...
Right, but he was like doing it in big halls, and over there, the people in the back would not hear him anyway.
Yeah, they wouldn't hear him.
You know what I mean? Especially in the women's section. That's for sure. There was way, way too far away to hear him. Because the rabbi was old at that time. He was 90 years old. He was old man already, His voice was very weak. It was very frail. So what's the answer to that question? So in order to, since he was our beloved rabbi, so we have to justify what he did, right? To try to justify it, because he was a very wise man, So we have to make sure we justify it. So I'll tell you how we can justify, and that also helps us, by the way, with our practical situation today, with the people who cannot go to the readings. So the way it goes like this, right? That we already mentioned two things. Number one is that we said, according to Moshe Feinstein, he said that the case of the shofar is not the same as the Megillah.
Yeah.
Why? Because the shofar, there's a delay with the echo. There's a delay.
Yes.
With the Megillah, it's right away with the microphone. Boom.
Yes.
Right away.
Right.
Not the same thing.
Right.
Number one. Number two, also, we mentioned that shofar is from the Torah. Megillah is only rabbinical. So when it comes to doubts in rabbinical, we go lenient. When it comes to doubts in Torah, we go stringent. That's the rule. Right? So here, since Megillah is from the rabbis, we can go lenient. That's what it is. You know what I mean? So now we have two reasons why. So the rabbi, even though he didn't write this in his book Yechabadat, the truth is that tshuva that he wrote over there was written quite a long time ago. Probably, I don't know, exactly, maybe 50 years ago, God knows what.
Yeah.
40 years ago. I don't know exactly when he wrote that. I have to look up the date, but the point is that after that, he must have changed his mind somewhere, somewhere along the line. But he didn't really write that down anywhere. But his Maaseh, Maaseh Rav, whatever he did proved that he changed his mind. Because he was doing something which is against what he wrote. You understand? So the only way we can justify is like this. To say that he must have come to terms with that. What does that mean? That because of the two reasons that we mentioned. Number one is that it's not the same case of the shofar. There's no delay, like Moshe Feinstein said. And also because it's rabbinical and it's doubtful. There's a doubt there. There's several doubts going on.
Yeah.
So therefore, we have like several doubts here going on regarding this. So since we have several doubts, and also there are some rabbis who agree with that it's allowed to use a microphone, technically speaking. Even though practically speaking, they don't really like that so much because it's like a newfangled thing, like a new moda, achali moda, they don't want things like that. But anyway, the point is, right, that in the case where there's no choice, you can use it. So the rabbi must have been already changed his mind and said to himself like this, right? Since we have several doubts about it, as we just mentioned, those two doubts, and there's also other things which are involved there as well. So therefore, it must be that since it's only rabbinical, the Megillah, so you're allowed to be lenient and read the Megillah with a microphone. So what happened was like this, right? The rabbi was a weak man. He was 90 years old, and he was, or 85, depending on which year you're talking about, whatever. The point is that he was already a weak man, and he wanted to read the Megillah. He thought that it was.
Did he ever get into this? Did he ever explain or apologize for using the microphone? No.
No, because so we have to justify.
I mean,
he didn't write about it afterwards. Why change his mind?
Right.
So we have to say that because of these doubts that we mentioned, and they're also what to rely on. There are some rabbis, big rabbis. Also the Chazon Ish, by the way, also brought up this issue, like Moshe Feinstein. He said also that the case of the microphone doesn't resemble the case of the shofar. Why? Because over there's a delay. Over here it's direct, with no delay. It's not the same thing. So therefore, when it comes to Safek de Rabbanan, like we say, right, it's rabbinical, it's from the rabbis, doubts, we're going to be lenient. So therefore he was lenient to use a microphone. That's what it must be. I have no other explanation besides that.
Yeah.
To explain the phenomenon here, right? God bless his soul, May his soul rise up and be elevated. That's what it must have been. Otherwise he wouldn't have done it. The rabbi, by the way, was an interesting character. What I mean to say is that there are some things that he wrote in his books, but personally he was doing different than what he wrote in the books. This is one example, but the truth is there's also other examples involved. I'll give you another example just to make you understand a little bit. There was also the example where the rabbi was regarding eating matzah, Dam Pesach, those hard matzot, ketebi,
Mm-hmm.
those hard ones, the stone, right? The stone edition. So those hard matzot, the rabbi writes in his book, Yebi Omer, that you should make on that mezonot, that's the custom of the Sfaradim. But he himself, he made hamotzi. He used to wash his hands and like a meal, like bread, make hamotzi like min haaretz. So even though he wrote in his book to make mezonot, he himself made hamotzi. Several rabbis told us this, by the way, that this is the way it was. So what does that mean? The rabbi, after his positions evolved, and got more wisdom, and he advanced more knowledge and so forth and so on, he did change his mind, right, regarding several things, and he did differently than actually what he wrote in his books. So this must be the reason why. So now coming back to our practical question, right? The truth is that, nevertheless, even though the rabbi was using a microphone, but the prevailing custom is not to use it. So what does that mean? It's better to go to, it's best obviously to go to a place where they're not using a microphone, or some kind of a Zoom broadcast. You don't want to do something like that. By the way, let me ask you a question. Zoom, right? It's pretty direct, no? Did you ever use Zoom, by the way?
No.
It's a very direct app. What does that mean? There's really no delay there. It's like whatever you say goes right away. It's a nice tool, A lot of professionals use it.
There's a delay over a phone, right?
I'm not sure. Probably not so much anyway, right? Not really something significant. But you know what? There is a delay, like radio broadcasts. There's a delay there, and they do it on purpose, by the way. You know why? Because they want to edit things, which bleep out things.
Oh,
they want to bleep.
I see.
That's why they do it. They want to have the bleep feature.
Yes.
You know those guys who make those dirty.
Yeah.
you know what we're talking about. Our friend over there.
Yeah.
Howard, yeah. So Hashem should bring him to Teshuvah. So he's Jewish, you know.
Yeah.
Okay. So anyway, the point is that there's no delay with Zoom. So really, the truth is like a microphone. It's the same thing. So what does that mean? That a person you should try to go to a reading, which is not with a microphone with Zoom. But let's say he can't go. There's no other way for him to get to hear the Megillah, right? So he should opt for that. He should go to a place where either they're reading with a microphone or it's being transmitted by Zoom. Because since it's a direct live broadcast with no delay, no apparent delay, not something significant there. So therefore, according to these poskim, Rabbi Feinstein, Minchat Elazar, right, and even Maran, Rav Ovadia, he himself was doing it. So that shows you that he held by it. I mean, he wrote differently, but he did what he did.
Yeah.
Bottom line. So the bottom line is, that when there's a need and there's no other choice, a person can definitely rely on that. There's no question. And not only that, but he can also say amen to the blessings, that the Chazan says, the Baal Koreh says over there in the synagogue, wherever it may be, even though you're hearing it on Zoom, he can say amen to the blessings and listen to the Megillah if he has no choice. That's what he can do. Obviously, this is not the best thing to do, obviously, but it seems like there's definitely what to rely on. We found some big rabbis who are holding by this shita, by this idea. So, there's a rule, by the way, in halakha. We'll finish with this, I'll tell you, right? That, as we mentioned several times, when it comes to halakha, we go like the majority, That's usually the way we do it. Just like everything else in life, majority rules, a democracy, whatever, lehavdil. So, not today's democracy, what they have over there, that they're fixing the ballots, right? We're not talking about that. They're making those dumps, in the middle of the night, dumping ballots from the moon they brought them, right? We're not talking about that.
You saw that transgender idiot they hired?
Speak to Ben Shapiro about it. He'll tell you about that. Okay, so anyway.
What a disgrace.
Okay, so anyway, right? What I want to tell you is that we go according to majority. So here, the truth is the majority are pretty much, against it. I mean, that's pretty much what it is. Even though there's several rabbis, big rabbis that are for it, but the prevailing opinion is against it. So therefore, a person really should not follow that lechatchila if he has a choice. But there's a rule in Gemara. It says, "Kedaihu Rabbi Shimon nismoch alav b'shat adchak." What does that mean? That you're allowed to follow the minority opinion, even though it's like one against everybody else, in a pressing situation. So here also it's a pressing situation, so therefore you're allowed to follow the minority opinion. That's a Talmudic principle, that in pressing situations where there's no choice, we follow the minority opinion. This is exactly what we're doing over here. So that's exactly what we're going to do. So we should try to go to a nice good minyan with no microphone. But if there's no choice, we live in the boondocks, so you can't get to a reading, so you can hear it on the microphone or on the Zoom. Baruch Adonai le'olam, amen, amen. Chag sameach, kasher v'sameach. Be blessed, health, wealth, and happiness.
Amen.
Amen ve'amen.
About the Purim holiday, something very interesting. We already give some story of Purim. You should look at that, by the way. I'm going to post it tomorrow. The story of Purim. There's a very interesting lecture that we did 2 years ago with Jimmy and some other people. You should listen to that if you want to hear the story of Purim. You want to hear the whole Megillah, as they say, the whole Megillah. So Megillah, that's the only one, right? So anyway.
Very good. Thanks for coming, David.
Thank you.
You walked?
Yeah.
All right. Good for your health.